And sometimes people will have greasy fat, greasy stools that will lie at the top of the toilet. So when I say to patients, what does your poop look like? They're like, I don't look at it. I'm like, well, you should, because it's important. There's something called Bristol stool chart, and it actually will depict what like the perfect stool should look like. And if your stool doesn't look like a number 4, that's okay. We can work on that. But stool is important. It's important information to determine, is transit time too fast? Is it too slow? If you're constipated and you have hemorrhoids and you're struggling to poop, that's very different than someone who says, I eat and I end up in the toilet 2 hours later with diarrhea. So there's a lot of information, but I would say hydrochloric acid, digestive enzymes, Tudca, I think are really helpful for digestion. And for a lot of women, the bloating can be multifactorial.
Welcome to the show, Cynthia Thurlow. I'm excited to have you on today.
Zora, I always love our conversations. It's a pleasure to be back.
We've been talking for like 30 minutes already. It's like we better hit record.
Yes.
You're so easy to speak with. It's so fun to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
So let's talk about your book, because this has been such an eye-opener for me. And I really, really want to dive a little deeper into that, give some information that you shared there. And it's all about the menopause gut. And no one I know has written a book about the menopause gut. So well done to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as I'm reading through it, I first started it and you're explaining this beautiful trip to southern Spain and Morocco, and then these horrible gut issues that you had. And I think everyone can relate to that. I think this is when they travel, things happen. But as you move along, you mentioned that, and you said this, to quote, the composition of our gut microbiome shifts over the course of our lifetime and is at its most diverse in our late 20s and early 30s and starts to change in our mid 40s. Oh my God. And that has a lot to do with the impact of the loss of our hormones. And I want to dive into this, but before we do, let's back it up, because there may be people here who have no idea what a gut microbiome is and some of these technical words.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to explain it is that we have microbiomes in every organ system. So there's a lung microbiome, there's an oral microbiome, there's a vaginal microbiome, there's a gut microbiome. And when we're talking about the gut, we're speaking specifically to 40 trillion bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and fungi that inhabit the large intestine or the colon. And when I did all of my medical training, I did not know anything about this. And it's really been the last 5 to 10 years that research has been emerging, helping us understand that there are more of them, these microorganisms, than there are cells in our body. So it really is this little city that exists within our colon that communicates with every single body system. It communicates with our lungs, our heart, our brains, our ovaries, which set the pacemaker of aging, our skin. I mean, literally everything. It is constantly communicating. And so I very humbly sit back and say that I think most of us understand where our brain is and where our heart is and where our lungs are, et cetera, maybe where our ovaries are. But the gut microbiome is a little less tangible, because it's not like it's not this one organ system you can just pluck out and put on a cadaver table and people can examine. But I'm here to explain that over the course of the last 5 years, I've had this incredible opportunity to interview all of these researchers and experts. And when my editor reached out to me and said, do you think you have a second book in you? And I said, I have an idea. It's going to sound a little crazy, but there's a whole conversation about the changes that occur in perimenopause and menopause that involve the gut microbiome that no one is having. And so I think that I would say that if you are a middle-aged woman and you're not thinking about your gut microbiome, you're missing out on an opportunity to support your health. And I'll give you one example. I mentioned that the gut microbiome communicates with every single organ system in the body. Do you know that the health of our gut impacts when we go into menopause? That the ovaries, which set the pacemaker of aging for women, we're born with a finite amount of eggs, unlike men that replenish sperm every 72 hours. And so if you understand that the health of your gut impacts when you go into menopause, impacts the health of your fertility, that blew my mind. I was like, this is not a conversation that we're having with our providers. And so whether it's the influence of our personal care products, our nutrition, our environment, our stress levels, our health of the food or the quality of the food that we eat all impact that microbiome. It's either giving it good inputs or it's detrimental inputs. And I'll give you another example that when I think about the impact of our childhood, good or bad, has a large impact in the imprinting of our nervous system, which impacts our gut microbiome because acute stress is good. Like right now, I'm sure if you measure my cortisol levels or yours, they're up a little bit because we're attuned, we're engaged, we're having a conversation, we're excited. But chronic stress is incredibly detrimental to our health. And we're now fully understanding the impact on not just the gut microbiome and leaky gut and all these other factors that I'm sure many people have heard of, but also might impact when we go into menopause. So that's like a big thing that I took away from writing this book. I was like, holy cow, chronic unrelenting stress, adverse childhood events, that can impact when we go into menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we having that conversation? Because even though I trained at a leading medical institution here in the United States, we never had that conversation about the impact of chronic stress. We talked about it like big T trauma, little T trauma was kind of a benign, innocuous. We didn't talk about it. And so I very humbly sat back that this book is just a vehicle to be able to share information that I think every woman that's out there and their significant others is going to get something out of. And maybe each one of us gets a different layer. Like I always say, it's like peeling an onion.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we peel a layer back, we get a little more out of it. But if you're leaving the gut microbiome out of the longevity and aging conversation, you're missing out because you can't just replace hormones. And they're important. Let me be very clear. I'm very pro hormone replacement therapy, or at least having a conversation around that. If you're just replacing hormones and not thinking about the gut, you're not going to have the same like longevity markers. You're not going to have the same experience as someone who's being more conscientious about that. And why would we be conscientious about an organ that we have never really been taught much about? So it's an interesting conversation and one that I think is really important for the aging population of women.
You're absolutely right. We don't really talk so much about this in gerontology, at least, which is part of longevity. And we never covered it, but we did cover stress. That's a huge piece in aging, and we understand that. But no one really ties it to the gut or brings that gut piece into it, which I think is really important what you did. And so we do know this gut brain axis, and you shared a lot about this in the book as well. So the impact of our perception of stress or stressors on the body will have a physiological impact. But I didn't realize the impact the gut in particular would have on the age of menopause. And we've had this discussion already because I've done some content on that. What are the 12 factors that impact your age of menopause? And stress is there, but not the gut piece. So this was something I think is really important because I have to say, in my community of women who are all menopausal, this is what we do, we have perimenopause and postmenopause, so many, I would say like 80% of them have gut issues.
Yep.
And it's prevalent, and it's something that people are always working on. And very often, not all the time, but very often it's tied to stress and the response to stress and how they're managing it or not managing it. So I find that piece really interesting that you are bringing it all together in your book. But the gut, you mentioned a lot of other things, that the loss of our hormones, the way it impacts our gut. And the list was very long. So maybe share a couple of things, what it means when we lose our estrogen or progesterone and testosterone. What impact does that have? Just name the sort of top ones there.
Yeah, I would say number one, estradiol, which is our predominant form of estrogen our bodies make prior to menopause, is a potent immune modulatory hormone. So that means that as our ovaries are aging, so does our immune system. And estrogen, the loss of estrogen, is really catastrophic for the immune system. What does that mean? That means that we have a thymus gland when we're born, and usually after puberty, they call it thymus involution, which is a terrible way of describing it. It kind of shrinks up, doesn't really do much. But it's really important for our immune system. And so our immune system without estrogen starts to become a little more reactive. It tends to be a little bit more prone to developing autoimmune conditions. We know 80% of women are the ones that make up the bulk of those that are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. About 20% are men. And we see there's over 100 now. When I finished my medical training, there are probably like 20 or 30, but we're just finding more and more and more of these autoimmune conditions. So more likely to see more autoimmune diseases. Big ones I see are Hashimoto's, celiac, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic Lyme, long haul COVID, all are autoimmune, unfortunately. And the other thing is we become less responsive to vaccines. So when I go to my local pharmacy to pick up my estrogen patch or whatever I'm picking up, they always offer me a constellation of, this is CVS. For anyone in the United States, if you go to CVS, they will offer you Pneumovax, which is the pneumonia vaccine. They'll offer the shingles vaccine. They'll offer a flu vaccine every single time I go. And what's interesting is our immune systems, because they're dampened in menopause, we have less reliability. If we get a vaccine, we're not going to be able to mount as much of an immune response. And so I remind people it's both good and bad. There are people who genuinely need these vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine. I want to make sure that's very clear, but we're not as responsive to vaccines. And that is a byproduct of this loss of estrogen and this immune system kind of modulation. So that's number one. Number two, with a loss of estradiol, we get shifts in diversity. So there are keystone bacteria, which make up the bulk of our microbiome. And obviously, this is all very bio-individual. So if you've had multiple rounds of antibiotics, if you're eating a standard American diet, if you have chronic, unrelenting stress, that is going to influence your microbiome, as opposed to someone who lives a little more, a diet where they're eating more nutrient dense foods. They manage their stress as best they can. And maybe they've had a couple courses of antibiotics, but it's not a chronic, relenting course of antibiotics. We know that if we have less keystone bacteria, we're more likely to have inflammatory bacteria. This is the dysbiotic organisms. And I remind people that whether it's antibiotics or chronic stress or the standard American diet, we're much more likely to breach the lining of that small intestine. So the term leaky gut, I think most people are familiarized with. Estrogen is responsible for helping keep those little tight junctions together. So with less estrogen, we're more likely to have leaky gut. On the other side of that small intestine is the immune system. If the immune system gets provoked, more likely to mount an immune response if we leak food particles into our bloodstream. So for those of you that are bloated after meals and it's new, you're reacting differently to food, especially dairy. Dairy seems to be one of these really reactive foods for middle-aged women. And then another thing that I think is really interesting, if we're talking about the big things, we have less short chain fatty acids as we get older. And so people think it's no big deal. Fiber is not important. I hear that a lot. Short chain fatty acids are potent signaling molecules in the body. Things like butyrate can cross the blood-brain barrier, really important. So when we eat fibrous foods, we goes through our digestive system, ends up in the large intestine where the colonocytes use it for food and they ferment, and then they can produce these short chain fatty acids. So butyrate is very important. It can cross the blood-brain barrier, and the blood-brain barrier is designed to be impermeable, but we want butyrate to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier for a variety of reasons. We're also less likely to create, in conjunction with another keystone bacteria, endogenous GLP-1. So GLP-1 drugs are very popular right now for good reason. I think they're helping a lot of people. I think we're seeing also some people that are microdosing and getting improvement in inflammation, autoimmune disease, et cetera. But our body makes GLP-1 on its own. And so if we have an alteration in the production of short chain fatty acids, like what happens in the setting of less hormones, we're not making as much. So you will be less satiated. We know that short chain fatty acids are involved in conjunction with certain keystone bacteria to produce mucus to protect the lining of the small intestine. The small intestine, if I didn't already mention it, is really important for absorption of nutrients. So not only are you impacted with this mucus production, protection, more likely to have leaky gut, as I remind most women that are heading into perimenopause and menopause, we become less stress resilient. So stress becomes a bigger impact on the gut. It's not just I'm engaged with Zora and I'm excited and I know my cortisol's up a little bit. That's acute, like happy stress. I'm talking about the chronic stress, the people that don't have any boundaries, people that are in toxic relationships or have a really miserable job. Someone moves, someone gets divorced, big things that impact our stress levels over time. You have a toxic team member, whatever it is going on in your personal life, we all have stress that comes about, but chronic unrelenting stress not only will break down the small intestinal lining in the setting of being well stress resilient, it'll break down our muscle. So we talk about how precious muscle is. We'll break that down as well. So there's a lot of different things that start to happen, but those are some of the, I would say, the big picture items that for people when they tell me fiber's not important, I will say fiber is very bio-individual. Fiber is indeed important. And if a woman tells me she can't tolerate fiber, the first thing I say is we have work to do on your gut because over time you can heal the gut to be able to tolerate more fiber. But to suggest that fiber is not important at all, you're not following the research and certainly not what I'm seeing clinically with patients. So I think those things all impact us. But what these show up as is bloating, digestive distress, someone saying to me, I feel like food sits in my stomach. I just don't digest it as well. And that could be as simple as you need more digestive fire, you need hydrochloric acid or digestive enzymes, or supplements like Tudca that help you emulsify and break down fats, also important for mitochondria. But I think for a lot of women, we get very accustomed to whatever is our normal is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to tell you that these symptoms can be signs of this kind of dysregulation in the gut that many women, they go to a gastroenterologist, they see their internist. There's nothing serious going on. But that gastroenterologist, that internist, more than likely was never taught some of these changes that are occurring that are driving those symptoms. And how do we kind of circumvent them? Because I don't think anyone listening wants to experience constipation, bloating, digestive issues, feeling like there's a rock sitting in your stomach. I had a patient recently say to me, I'm so worried I have gastroparesis, which is the severe manifestation, usually of diabetes, where you get decreased motility in the gut and it's oftentimes not reversible. And then when I explain, hey, listen, if you understand that progesterone is a smooth muscle relaxant and estradiol is important for nitric oxide production in our body, which is another super important signaling molecule that helps dilate things and especially important for endothelium, which is the lining of our blood vessels, explains a lot about why people feel like they're just not moving food as efficiently through their digestive system. It's a byproduct of the loss of hormones. And so not enough people are made aware of these things. And I think knowledge is power. Like that is the big takeaway. There's so much information in the menopause gut about what we can do. And the microbiome is incredibly malleable. So if your microbiome's a mess right now, trust me, I was there in 2019. I am 100% better now, just like countless patients I've worked with. There's so much that we can do. This is not meant to be scary, but this might be the first time you're hearing this information.
It is incredible what happens to our bodies when we lose our hormones or when they're fluctuating too. Sometimes it's just a matter of the fluctuations or the ratios are off, but the impact that it has in the gut microbiome and it has in our immune system, like you said, so many things are disrupted. It's not just the gut that we're talking about. It's just because the gut, like you said, impacts everything else. And that's why so many functional medicine doctors to me, it seems every time I interview them, it's like, it's the gut. Yep. We always start with the gut.
And they're doing it right, for sure. For sure. And I jokingly say what goes on in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. Unlike Vegas, where what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. And so I've started saying that because people have this idea that everything in medicine is siloed. You know, the heart's not communicating, this very important vagus nerve. Oh, it bypasses communicating all the way from the brain to the gut. No, no, no. It is constantly communicating and we are not siloed. So what stays in the gut does not stay in the gut. It is absolutely communicating consciously and effortlessly all day long.
It does. It does. And I encourage women to learn more about it, get intuitive. And we have our gut feelings and it is a sign to actually really do something about it. And I want to know in your community what you're seeing, because what I'm seeing through the women who are having gut issues, there are many reasons why they have it. Sometimes it's a parasite, sometimes it's the stress, sometimes it's, I don't know, and some people just take some supplements and they're all cured and fabulous, and some people need other work. But what I do see often is the woman who I tend to attract the people in like membership, the people who are doing it all. They're doing the red light therapy and the diet and the exercise and really trying everything to manage their stress and buying some new high tech gadget. And I'm seeing it's too much. And it's actually causing more stress. They're actually under eating, overtraining, and these are major stress impacts on the body. And when we dial it back, it's amazing how the gut heals itself without trying so hard. And
Yep.
it's really hard to tell a woman who is doing it all and trying so hard to say, look, you gotta exercise less and eat more. And it's this horrified look on their face, and maybe not try so hard and maybe do some other things to regulate the nervous system. But it's a miracle. And in just several weeks, you can see the impact that it has. Less bloating, can sleep at night. The digestive issues are gone, or they're not constipated anymore. So I'm wondering if you're seeing this too, or is it just because I'm attracting a certain group of people?
Well, I think it's called bright shiny object syndrome, right? Like we like the idea of gadgets, and gadgets are fun, but you got to major in the majors. If you are not sleeping through the night, do not buy a gadget. If you cannot manage your stress well, do not buy another gadget. Same thing if you are under eating or overeating, focus on that. Or if you're not exercising, start moving your body, even if it's just walking. And I think that until the majors, as I affectionately refer to them, if you have not mastered those, don't buy another gadget. And it's not to suggest I love gadgets. I have tons of gadgets. I have gadgets upon gadgets upon gadgets. But when it comes down to it, if you are not sleeping through the night, which is probably the number one issue after weight loss resistance for women that show up in programs or that we interact with, well, you got to do other things. And it's not a criticism. It is so easy to say, I don't want to go to bed an hour earlier. What I want to do is buy this one gadget that's going to fix my sleep and is going to fix my stress and is going to fix all these other things. And I'm like, no, invest the effort in the foundational elements that are going to not only help your microbiome, but are going to help you overall. Because when you're not sleeping, you can't manage your stress. You're not going to make good food choices, and you're not going to feel like you have enough energy to exercise. So kind of always go back to major in the majors as a key theme, just personally, like when I'm working with people, and more often than not, I'm telling them to do less. They need more recovery, not more workouts. They need more food, not less. Because obviously, my foundation was built on metabolic health and intermittent fasting. And very transparently, I say it's not that I don't believe in it as a strategy. I absolutely do. There are absolutely people this is a great strategy for. But what I find is a lot of women that are intermittent fasting are also chronically underfueling their bodies. They're not getting enough protein. They're worsening their sarcopenia, which is muscle loss with aging. The other thing is, if someone's really tired, not sleeping, they're just not feeling good, they've already got mitochondrial issues. At the basis of everything, when we think about it from a very fundamental level, we're talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. And that really accelerates after the age of 40. So anyone that's got diabetes, high blood pressure, I mean, you name any chronic disease, at the basis, even hypothyroidism, it is a cellular energy problem. And if you don't fix what is broken, every estrogen patch and oral progesterone and androgel and all these things and every supplement and the Oura ring and Pulsetto, whatever. And I love all these gadgets. Let me be very clear. I'm just throwing out a couple that came to mind first. You're not going to be able to feel like you were thriving. You're going to feel like you're surviving. And that's not the point. So I agree with you that we probably attract very smart, very educated women who are trying to think about all the things. And I would pick one or two things and master those and then move on. But the foundational piece is so important because let me give you another example. When we're dealing with chronic stress, it wrecks your gut. And think about it. When you're stressed, we tend to be one or two extremes. We either want to eat or we don't want to eat. When I'm super stressed, I don't think about eating. That's just the way my brain works. So I have to work even more conscientiously about adding in more nutrition. But I remind people cortisol is not a bad hormone, but cortisol, if it's elevated over time, your blood glucose goes up, your insulin goes up, you're going to be in fat storage mode. People get so angry about the stress piece. And I'm like, just imagine what it's doing to your microbiome, the input that you're getting. Because when you're stressed, you're not going to crave chicken and broccoli. You're probably going to pick hyper palatable foods. You're going to sit down and have a pizza. No shade on pizza, because back in the day when I could tolerate dairy and gluten, I thought it was delicious. But the point being, you're probably not going to crave the foods that are going to support not just healthy neurotransmitters, but healthy hormones. You're probably not going to be eating the foods that are going to be nourishing the microbiome, like protein and fiber as an example. So I think it's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Once we get unwound, it takes time to get wound up again. And so when I'm working with women, we really emphasize major in the majors because that messaging is so important. And unfortunately, in the health and wellness space, the newest gadget, the shiniest object, and we just get distracted from the foundational work that really does make a big difference.
Yeah, because the gadgets are fun and easy. That's why
Yeah.
we want them. It's, it's everything else is boring to do all that hard work.
No, I mean, but boring is good. Like you sometimes see on social media, some of these philosophizers, as I like to refer to them, they're like, we hate to say this, but like the foundational boring stuff is actually what's going to get you way farther than the easy stuff. And so as much as human nature wants to take a shortcut, there are no shortcuts. Like you really do have to do the same, have that kind of same approach to what you're doing day to day. Doesn't mean that it's every day is the same. It just means go to bed earlier, manage your stress better. It's not 5 minutes of meditation once a week. Make sure you're eating mostly unprocessed foods. Make sure you're drinking enough water. Make sure you're moving your body. Like those things are constants. You might have one day where you're not moving as much, like when you travel, but that's okay. Make up for it another day.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the microbiome diversity, because you talk a little bit about this in the book too. And I think it's really important for our gut, because you mentioned about the microbiome, and we have these microbes and we want to feed the good ones. And tell us a little bit about what it means to have diversity in your microbiome.
It's such a good question, Zora. First and foremost, having those hormones, in particular progesterone and estradiol, helps maintain the species of anti-inflammatory microorganisms that we have in the gut. And so what starts to happen with this alteration and decrease in our healthy gut bacteria, we get more pro-inflammatory species, the ones that have the tendency to not only alter neurotransmitters, so it can impact mood and cognition, but also can be more inflammatory. And think about the communication pathway that goes between the gut and the brain. A lot of brain inflammation is driven by gut inflammation. So I remind people all the time when we get alterations in neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, or alterations in GABA, which is our main inhibitory neurotransmitter, you can get changes in the way that we perceive the world. So diversity is important for maintaining the beneficial species. And we do see changes and alterations. We have more pro-inflammatory microorganisms. One of the things that's really interesting is that as we have more inflammatory species in the gut, like what happens during this perimenopause to menopause transition, remember the vagus nerve is this superhighway communication pathway between the gut and the brain. And for a lot of women, they'll get a lot of brain-related symptoms, brain inflammation, neurocognitive changes. They may have more depression, more anxiety, and that can be a direct reflection of alterations in serotonin and dopamine in the gut. And like I said earlier, what goes on in the gut does not stay in the gut. So more inflammation, more oxidative stress, more dysbiotic organisms, these are the ones that have the potential to go on and create disease. So in a lot of different levels, there's this domino effect that occurs, and it's very bio-individual. We know that there are some consistencies between women, but very bio-individual because we're not all starting from the same spot as we're making that perimenopause transition. Maybe for those people, you live in Europe and you have a lot less processed food, you're getting a lot more sunlight, a lot more exercise than probably most Americans. And so that influences your microbiome beneficially, as opposed to someone that's living in an urban environment where you don't get exposure to grass or parks, and you're heavily influenced by the stress of living in a city. And let me be clear, I think living in cities is great. I'm just thinking of the more urban environments where maybe people, their grocery store is like a corner market. They're not getting as much fresh fruits and vegetables. They're probably eating a lot more processed foods. Maybe there's someone that was plagued with ear infections and got serial antibiotics every year for the first 15 years of their lives. Their microbiome is going to be different than someone who's maybe had antibiotics sparingly throughout their lifetime. So there's a lot that impacts that, but that diversity is one of the first things that we see shifting with those loss of hormones.
So, how do we get more diversity? What's your top tips for that?
Well, I would say that brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables. So all those brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables are signaling molecules. They're polyphenols. And so that's one way, really being diverse, going to the grocery store and trying something new every week. I can admit that I can be very food monogamous. I might have the same 5 or 6 foods that I like to eat, but always trying a new fruit or a new vegetable every time I'm there, not getting caught up in eating berries in the middle of winter when they're being shipped from Chile to the United States, maybe using things that are more seasonal. It's still winter, so like apples and pears are going to be a better choice than berries, which is not to suggest berries aren't a beneficial thing. I would say that's number one. I would say the other thing, to be totally transparent, most of us don't realize that you need to be in the parasympathetic to be able to digest your food. And I think most people are eating on the go. They're eating while they're working, they're eating in their car, they're eating off their kids' plates. So understanding that it's not just about the digestion piece, but digestion starts in our brain. So if you're sitting down to a meal and you take 4 to 5 deep breaths, that's signaling to your body that I'm safe, I'm getting ready to eat, and you're going to be able to better digest and assimilate the nutrients in the food. You're going to be able to detoxify. And yes, detoxification is something that our body does every day, but can be harbored by our lifestyle. I would say those are two things that everyone can do, irrespective of where they are, that have a huge net benefit. Because if you're in the parasympathetic, your body is like, okay, I'm ready to accept the food. I'm ready to break it down and assimilate it. I'm going to be ready to detoxify, break that food down, ensure that it ultimately gets through the digestive system and I can eventually poop it out. But I think for a lot of people, they overcomplicate. They seriously overcomplicate what they're doing. Now, when I talk about those brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables, we're still talking about fiber, right? Fiber is still very important, very bio-individual. There's probably someone listening that can't tolerate more than 10 grams a day. There's probably others that can tolerate 50 grams a day, very bio-individual. But if you cannot tolerate fiber, that is a sign that there's something going on in the gut that genuinely needs to be investigated. And it doesn't have to be scary. I had 6 weeks of antibiotics in 2019. I couldn't tolerate fiber for at least 2 years, and it took a very long time to be able to eat as much fiber as I do now. But now we're looking at this 7 years later, and I just had a colonoscopy, and my gastroenterologist, because I get them every 5 years because I have a terrible family history. And he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And he said, what are you doing differently? I said, I eat a lot of fiber. And I know that can be very triggering for people, but that is the one change that I have made personally that I think has made a big difference in my digestive system and also in my colonoscopy results. I'm sharing that just to be transparent because there's always things we can be doing. It doesn't have to be that you go from 5 grams of fiber to 50. It might just be that you're adding in more probiotic rich foods. Maybe you're having some ferments with your meals. Maybe you have identified it's only like 30 to 40% of us produce the right or have the right microbiome to be able to produce a compound called urolithin A, which is super important. It's another signaling molecule. So the rest of us don't. I don't even need to be tested. I am quite confident after 6 weeks of antibiotics, antifungals. I'm one of those people and I just feel better. I actually take a supplement because I can't get enough from pomegranates and walnuts and strawberries and things like that. So there's a place for supplements, but I think number one, brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables plus some fiber in there. It's automatic. And then making sure you're in a true parasympathetic state when you sit down to eat is really important for at least one meal a day. If you're on the go for the other two, I accept that. I used to be someone that would stand and round on patients and sometimes didn't have time to sit down and eat lunch. I would eat a disgusting protein bar. And I say disgusting because that was not what I wanted to be eating, but I needed some nourishment. And put that in air quotes, nourishment, quasi-nourishment, but that was what I could do with what options I had.
I like I like that you're keeping it real because sometimes, this is you're giving us tips in an ideal state, and I do that too, and it's great if you can. But the reality is not everybody can do that all the time. And you give us room for that, and you give us permission, you meet us where we're at and saying if that's all you can do at the moment, fine. It's a great place to start because some people just give up entirely. I can't do that perfect routine and well, forget it. No, just try to get it in as much as you can. And one way I like to get things done, I stack things because who has the time to do all of these things? So I'll, for my meals when I can, and obviously weather permitting, I'll go outside. If I have a patch of grass, I'll go sit on the grass, get grounded at the same time.
I love that.
Take those breaths. I'm in the sunshine. I'm getting some vitamin D. I'm getting all this circadian rhythm clock set and I'm having my meal, focusing on my meal. And I think you don't realize how many benefits you have with just trying to hit two or three things and getting all those colors on the plate. And when you say choosing colors, if I'm shopping in a supermarket, I choose purple cabbage over green, or I'll choose red onion. I'll take red onions and white onions, but I try to eat the red ones more. So if you have a choice, I always think, well, yeah, let's choose the colorful one. And we know we've got more polyphenols and nutrients in there that may be more beneficial for you. But I also try to get the plate with another color on it. It's a game for me. If my plate is too monocolored, I'm like, okay, let's throw in something just to give it color. And I think it all adds up in very small ways.
No, it definitely does. And if you don't follow Zora's stories, you need to, because I always admire what you're putting together. Very transparent. I need to do a better job of that myself. I think by the time I sit down to eat, I'm just like, I'm so like focused on eating that I'm not thinking about filming it. But that's a great example, is that you're just thinking of kind of strategic ways to do multiple things. Like we get outside and walk our dogs. We have 3 dogs, which makes this sound crazy, but I promise we have 2 seniors and a nearly 2-year-old dog. And so we get out with the dogs every day. So we're getting sunlight on our retinas first thing in the morning. We're connecting with nature, although it's been very cold where I live over the past 2 weeks. We're finally hitting a warm spell. So we're like thrilled. It's like not below 10 degrees when we wake up in the morning, which is Fahrenheit, which is fantastic.
You've got some cold therapy, which is good for you too.
Yes, a little bit of hormetic stress. My husband always goes out without a jacket. I just get too cold. So I have a jacket and a hat, but that's his hormetic stressor. That's kind of what he does. But finding little ways, we're ticking off 2 or 3 boxes just with that morning walk. And I find that we started doing that during the pandemic, but it's a great way for us to talk about our day and connect, because we both work from home. And when we're in work mode, we're sometimes not necessarily saying more than a couple sentences to each other during our day. But for everyone that's listening, what we're trying to suggest is that you do things that are sustainable, that you can do for a long term. And that's why I try to keep it as simple as possible. Obviously, in the book, it runs the gamut from like super simple stuff all the way to the gadgets, because my editor really wanted me to include a wide range of things. But certainly every chapter in the back starts off with like actionable things that everyone can do. And then if you want a bright, shiny object, and I know we all do on occasion because it's fun, the novelty of it, which is another thing that's important with aging, just having novelty. There's definitely, it runs the gamut.
You do. That book is so jam packed. It is so good. It's going to be a Bible for me now. Like when I need to go back and see things. And I do like your list of recommendations. And what do you do, or what do you recommend to your clients? And there's things, yeah, like the gadgets and the devices and the supplements, and then the brands that you like. I like to get into the nitty gritty. Like, I wonder what brand Cynthia likes. And actually, very much coincide. They're pretty much all my favorites are there too, which was great, including midlife pause, and everything was very much in alignment. And I really like that. But since we're on the topic of supplements, and what supplement do you think is one of the best for helping a woman with her gut? And probably be specific, because gut issues are obviously could be deep bloating, constipation, and diarrhea.
Yep.
Maybe that's like totally different things. So if there was one, which would you say someone to look at?
I feel like a lot of bloating, if we've already done an elimination diet and we've already done the make sure you sit down, have 4 to 5 deep breaths, tell your body you're in a parasympathetic, then I start thinking, is this someone with stool testing? Are we going to see that they're low in digestive enzymes? I mean, that is a super simple way to address bloating. I know that the brand that I'm really fond of, I don't need to take the recommended dose because it's so potent, but it helps break down protein and fat and carbohydrates. So I would say digestive enzymes and or some hydrochloric acid if we've determined that your hydrochloric acid levels are low. I would say the other thing that I think is really important, and I didn't talk about this, is that the decline in estrogen impacts bile. Bile is a substance that is kind of sequestered in the gallbladder. So the gallbladder, a lot of women end up having their gallbladders out, but if you haven't, your bile is kept in your gallbladder and it's tied into the liver, and your digestive system will dispense a certain amount of bile to help break down and emulsify fat. So think about it like you're washing your dishes and you have something that's greasy. The soap is the surfactant. It breaks down the fat, and really important. So as estrogen goes down, our bile doesn't work quite as well. So you may become fat malabsorbed. And my absolute favorite, one of my favorite supplements is Tudca, which is an acronym. It is a very long word, but Tudca is easier to say. But it doesn't just help with bile, it also helps your mitochondria. It also helps cross the blood-brain barrier. So remember I was talking about how some of these signaling molecules are so important because we want certain ones to cross the blood-brain barrier. Tudca helps brain health. It helps with fat absorption. It helps to emulsify and break down fats. And bile and estrogen go together. So as your estrogen is declining, you may notice you don't tolerate fatty meats. You don't tolerate fatty foods. Like for a long time, I thought something was wrong with me, that I tolerate plant-based fats, but not animal-based fats. So if you give me a ribeye or duck fat fries, I'm going to struggle. I'm going to be nauseous. And I have a very healthy gallbladder. It's not my gallbladder. It's as my estrogen was declining, my body had to work really hard to break down that fat. And so I do a better job with plant-based fats. It might be the only time you hear me say plant-based, whatever. But for me, I do better with like olive oil or olives. Those types of fats I do really well. Lard, tallow, duck fat, not as well. I will generally not feel very good, but that is the beauty of the individual piece. But we become a little fat malabsorbed. And I can actually see that on stool testing. If someone is fat malabsorbed, we use the term steatocrit, which is a fancy way of saying fat malabsorption. And sometimes people will have greasy fat, greasy stools that will lie at the top of the toilet. So when I say to patients, what does your poop look like? They're like, I don't look at it. I'm like, well, you should, because it's important. There's something called Bristol stool chart, and it actually will depict what like the perfect stool should look like. And if your stool doesn't look like a number 4, that's okay. We can work on that. But stool is important. It's important information to determine, is transit time too fast? Is it too slow? If you're constipated and you have hemorrhoids and you're struggling to poop, that's very different than someone who says, I eat and I end up in the toilet 2 hours later with diarrhea. So there's a lot of information, but I would say hydrochloric acid, digestive enzymes, Tudca, I think are really helpful for digestion. And for a lot of women, the bloating can be multifactorial, but a lot of it, if we've rolled out more serious stuff and we've already done some food elimination, that's usually the next step.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I got good list. Digestive enzymes, HCl, and Tudca. I got to take a deeper dive into Tudca because I
I
hear
love
more and more
Tudca.
about it, and a lot of people don't know about it. So it's like a
It's
whole other episode to
It's like
record
life
about Tudca.
changing. I mean, and I say this personally, and when I recommend it for women, I usually will cycle a bottle on and off so that my body it doesn't get lazy. But I think Tudca, there's a lot there for the mitochondria. It's really interesting. I think that your community would also, if they're not familiarized with it, every time I learn something new about Tudca, I'm like, yet another reason why I like to use it. But it's been life changing for me personally, like totally different digestion. It's incredible. So part of my healing journey too.
I love that. One other supplement that has been popping up lately in my community, women are telling me that they're getting good results from butyrate, like sodium
Yep.
butyrate.
hmm
And it just, again, I think everyone's got like, where are you coming from? It's so hard to say, but
Yeah.
it is a big piece. And so far, knock on wood, like I've got the stomach of steel. I
That's great.
eat
That's probably,
doesn't like I don't feel anything. So not yet. I'm
yeah.
like, okay, how long can I get away with this? Because like with the loss of the hormones and there's so many factors that can, and I'm always wondering, gosh, I don't have symptoms, but does that mean I don't have a gut issue? Because people who are into the gut, they're like, just because you don't feel it doesn't mean like you're
That's true. I mean, I'll be honest with you. My husband was treated for tuberculosis last year, which is a wild story. And he was on 6 months of TB therapy, which is almost like chemo drugs. They're really toxic. That man, I'm not kidding, for 6 months had 1 week where he didn't feel good. The rest of the time felt fine. And so we went to a health and wellness center in September, and they give you a lot of fiber in your meals, which was fine for me. What was interesting was after 6 months of antibiotics, he could not tolerate the fiber. It was the only time I've ever heard him say, you have to give me less fibrous food, just give me more protein, because his digestive system was so sensitive to all the fiber. And it became this very interesting conversation for both of us. I said, your microbiome has been altered substantially because you were on 6 months of antibiotics, appropriately so. TB is hard to kill and hard to get. Unfortunately, he got it. He's thankfully not immunocompromised. We had a big workup. But I just share this to say, my husband, who's never had a complaint his entire life, the only thing that he talked about was at this event was the amount of fiber. He said, I don't think I realized how much fiber they were giving me and how little my body was tolerating. Now, I think with each month, we're doing a lot to support his gut microbiome. But I said, for 6 months, it's going to take a while before we're going to be able to repopulate and help support your gut. Men go through andropause, but it's not nearly as dramatic as what women go through. And so things like butyrate and short chain fatty acid support are things that we have for him because I think it's so important and we're getting really good results. So I think butyrate is interesting because it's that short chain fatty acid that I mentioned that can cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's like one of these primary fuel sources for the colonocytes in the gut, which are the little colon cells in the colon or the large intestine, depending on who you speak to. But I think it's really interesting that power of the N of one. There's probably people listening, they're like, I've never had a gut issue. I will tell you, I had a conversation with one of my childhood best friends. I just wrote a Substack, which has kind of gone viral, talking about some specific aspects of my childhood. And what was interesting was my best friend said to me, you always had gut issues when we were a kid. And I was like, no, I didn't. And she said, you always had a stomach ache. But she said, I think you had a stomach ache because you were chronically stressed because of what you experienced at home. But I don't remember any of that. Maybe that's a delicious amnesia effect of when I was younger. But the point of why I'm sharing is that I think there are some people who are more attuned to what their gut is doing than others. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's just the way that your body's wired. I think we're all wired a little differently. So Zora, when you say I just don't have gut issues, you may not even have much going on, and that's not a bad thing. But I look at my husband as a good example. Like he's not a complainer by nature. He would have to be dying before he'd complain about something related to his gut. So I think for each one of us, it's very bio-individual. And it doesn't mean if you have symptoms that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that if you have no symptoms, it means nothing's going on. We know that there are things happening because of that decline in hormones, but there's a lot we can do to offset that.
So when I have gut issues, I'm calling you.
I can tell you what I've done over the last 7 years. It's wild. It is wild when you think about it.
You did share some of that in the book as well. And I think it's something people got to take a deep dive in. I have so many more questions, and I feel like I have to choose just one before I let you go. But let's choose two. What are your top three foods to avoid and top three to take when you're trying to optimize gut health in menopause?
Okay, I would say top three to avoid. I think that, and I want to say this and be conscientious about how I say this, eat less processed foods. We know the emulsifiers, the additives, the artificial colors, sugars, etc. We know they're detrimental to the gut. And I'm a realist. Like, I get it. I had a protein bar the other day because I was starving and I was out and it was going to be a while before I got home. If you have to do it, but just overall, eat more nutrient dense whole foods. There are so many shortcuts now. If you walk into a US-based grocery store, you can have your chicken can already be cooked for you. Vegetables can already be prepped for you. I really feel like there's so many things. Yes, you pay for the convenience, but there's so many things we can do now that shorten that trajectory of like, oh, well, I don't want to spend hours cooking. You don't have to. Just eat more nutrient dense whole foods and eat less processed foods. I would say number two, absolutely alcohol. I know people don't like to hear this. I was trained at a time when I was taught that you should have a glass of red wine every night. In fact, it was part of my recommendations for all my cardiac patients, every single one of them. And I think about it now, and we know that there are little to no benefits from alcohol, full stop. I think when you start to look at, and I talk about this in the book, rates of specific types of cancers, including breast cancer, even with daily consumption of alcohol, I think you really have to think, is it benefiting you? Does that mean if you have a celebration or birthday, enjoy yourself? But if you are drinking a lot every day, the research is certainly suggestive that it is impacting your sleep, leading to a leaky gut, can increase your risk of breast cancers, as well as other types of cancers. And then I would say number three, just be mindful of sugar. Sugar is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. I find most of my patients are so addicted to sugar and they don't even realize it. Like they literally do not realize how much sugar is in their condiments. And it's okay to eat ketchup and it's okay if you want prepared salad dressing. I get it. Like I'm a total realist, but just start, if you do nothing else for a day or two, just track how much sugar you consume. Eat less sugar. We know that it's not beneficial. We know that it's inflammatory. We know that in many instances it leads to more dopamine release, which is going to lead to more addiction. And it just becomes this behemoth. Like when I start doing intakes on women and I'm like, tell me what you eat and don't tell me what you think I want you to be eating. Just tell me what you eat. Because I can't help you if you tell me like I eat pristinely and I don't know why I'm weight loss resistant, because that's generally not the case. Like tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. sugar is a huge problem. So I would say decrease your sugar, limit your alcohol or eliminate it, and avoid slash limit your processed food. So that's kind of big. When it comes to foods I think we should be eating more of, I would say find ways to integrate fibrous foods into your diet. It doesn't have to be the same thing every day, but it could be some lentils or beans on a salad. It doesn't have to be a lot. I think people are now so fearful of carbohydrates. I'm like, listen, we have lost the plot on carbohydrates. You have vilified, you, as in the society has vilified carbohydrates. The problem is it's the processed carbs. It is not having a quarter cup of beans or an eighth of a cup of lentils or half a cup of rice that is probably doing it. So I think we need to be realistic. So have some fiber in your diet. I like resistant starch. So cooled cooked potatoes, cooled cooked rice. Maybe you have to be mindful of portions. If we want to talk specifically about portions of carbohydrate, usually 30 grams max. If you are not metabolically healthy, you need less. And yes, we store carbohydrate in our muscles as glycogen and also the liver. And when we exceed those thresholds, that's when we start seeing our triglycerides climb. Number two, I would say that the things that I think a great deal about are eating enough protein, because when I track and I look at women's protein intake, it's all too low. And I think people think about it like, I have to have a second job thinking about my protein. No, you just need to track what you're consuming and eat more. Like you should be eating no less than 30 to 50 grams in a meal, because we know we become anabolically resistant. And if you're not eating enough protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and hit that leucine threshold, you're going to struggle with muscle. Not only do we want to maintain it, we need to continue to build it. And the more that I interview all these experts, I'm like, if you are struggling, if you're doing all the right things, you're strength training and you're working hard enough and you're sleeping and you're eating enough protein, it's probably because your mitochondria are in the toilet. And I know that's a secondary conversation. I would say third, the things that I think are so interesting is just being conscientious about your fat intake. And it doesn't mean that you're eating copious amounts, but try different types of fats. So I think whether it's MCT oil, olives, salted pistachios, because I'm a fan of those. Just thinking comprehensively, we do need some fats in our diet. Just remembering fats are calorically dense. So you can't just open up a bag of pistachios. I love salted pistachios. Like that is one of my great joys. That and maybe a little bit of dark chocolate, which maybe I probably should have said, maybe we just need to be eating more polyphenol rich foods like dark chocolate as a good one. But just be conscientious, because I think we've also gotten fat phobic. We're still there. Like sometimes when I'm talking to women, I'm like, do not be afraid of fat. But if the fat is in your salmon steak or your ribeye, you don't need to add copious amounts of fat. A lot of questions I get, Zora, are around the ketogenic diet, which I think works well for some people. It's really dependent on your microbiome. Not everyone tolerates that much fat in their food or in their diet. So I think there's some degree of bioindividuality. So more polyphenol rich foods, be conscientious about fiber, eat enough protein, drink enough water. Water is so underrated. Dehydration, we know that as we are getting older, less estrogen, higher FSH in our bodies, we lose those thirst receptors. We're not as good about realizing we're dehydrated until we are. Like I jokingly said, over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of podcasts every week. And then I was recording my audiobook, and then I have my own podcast. And I said, I've been doing so much talking. What I'm finding is my heart rate comes down later at night. My HRV is in the toilet. And I know it's because I'm dehydrated. So by the time you are thirsty, you are already dehydrated. So staying hydrated helps with energy, helps with your mitochondria, helps you fall asleep, helps you recover from your workouts. And so I think it's not a sexy topic, but hydration, I think, is equally important.
Wow, what a great list. And I think it's so simple. Why don't we do it? Just lower the processed food intake, alcohol, sugar. These are things that we know, and not to demonize things, but we got to reel this stuff in. And then just eating, I like eating more carbs. Great. Adding more lentils and beans, get that protein in and eat the healthy fats, the polyphenols and the water. I remember I interviewed, did you ever interview Dr. Richard Johnson, who did
I love Rick. Gosh, he's such a nice man. And he's so
he's
smart, but he's just such a nice human being.
He's great. He's got such a way to storytelling as well. And I never forget when you talked about water and hydration. And
Hmm.
he's like, when you're thirsty, it's already too late.
Yep.
You're already storing fat. I was like, What? Are you kidding me? Yeah. And he explained it obviously in a long way. If that doesn't motivate you, then come on, get more water in your life.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things like when I kept saying major in the majors, like before you even think about buying any of the supplements that we talked about, please, please, please get your water intake dialed in. Like I had so many patients in cardiology that would say to me, Cynthia, I don't want to go to the bathroom more. And I was like, I understand intellectually, but you are dehydrated, which is why you're in the hospital because you are keeping yourself chronically dehydrated and you pass out and hit your head. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen to anyone. But the point is, I know that when I am not properly hydrated, my sleep isn't going to be as good. I'm not going to recover from a workout. I'm not going to be as clear mentally. I don't think there's anyone in your community that doesn't want to be clear mentally, but just understanding that something that is so simple, like I have a glass pitcher in my kitchen. My family makes fun of me, and I fill it up every morning and I add some electrolytes. And I know before I go to bed, I have to have consumed 60 ounces of water. And that's how I visually remind myself. And that's something anyone can do, whether it's a glass water bottle you take to work and you fill it up a couple and we're done until I go to bed. But that's okay. That's okay.
Okay, I feel like I have to have you on for part two, but I honestly think everyone just needs to take a deep dive. If you are interested in the deep dive in the Menopause Gut, the book, it's all there. I can't ask her all the questions, but it's all there. And I'm going to have links to that in the show notes and where you can get that as well. And you did such a good job. You made it so easy to read. Thank you, Cynthia, for that. And I'll have a link to how to find you on Twitter and your Facebook and Instagram. You're all over the place and your information is so valuable. And I'm so grateful for all the work that you do over the years and years and years that you've been doing this. This is not like your first rodeo here. Before I do let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with before I let you go?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I feel like this is my second book and it's the one I'm like so proud of. Like I actually said to my husband, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's probably, I'm gonna try not to get emotional. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, like truly, because I think that everything I have learned as a clinician, I dedicated the book to my family, but also to all the female patients I had taken care of over all these years because they've taught me so much. One thing that a lot of people have asked about, and I know we didn't touch on, it's impossible to touch on all the things in an hour, but if anyone is listening that has had the experience of adverse childhood events, which in the United States, there was a joint venture between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. You can get online, you can check it out. It's a very short quiz that you can take. But if you have a high ACE score, just know that influences when you go into menopause, it influences your nervous system. For a lot of these people, they have a rockier transition through perimenopause. I know I did personally. In fact, I just wrote a Substack article on it because I was felt so called to do it. But just know that you can come out on the other side. Like I always say, like perimenopause is the storm, and then menopause is the calm afterwards. And I think for a lot of women, if you're in perimenopause and you feel like it's the storm, like that was definitely what I experienced. And now I can retrospectively say, oh my gosh, like when I finally started doing not all the things, but when I started making changes and being more attuned to my physiology, things all fell into place. So the point of why I share that is I think for a lot of women that grew up with a lot of adverse childhood events, they will experience because it's almost like the wheels fall off the bus. You get to perimenopause and you've been holding it together for so many years. And then all of a sudden your physiology is changing, your neurotransmitters change, your hormones change. And you're like, I can't hold it all together anymore. That is very normal. There are so many resources for you if that is what you are experiencing. And I just share that transparently because people make assumptions. They see all of us online and they assume it was a breeze. And there's a lot of reasons why I left clinical medicine 10 years ago. And one of them was my lifestyle no longer fit my physiology. I was in a very stressful job. I was having a really hard time with perimenopause. I think my husband thought I was having a midlife crisis. But now he looks back and he's like, no, you were doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So I share that in case you're listening and you're one of those people that had that experience or has that experience, you can come out on the other side. And now I humbly look back and I'm like, wow, that was a wild ride. But on the other side, things are so much better. So just know and take heart that if you're experiencing that, it will get easier.
Oh, I love that. And I'm going to have a link to that Substack article. It was so good. You were so vulnerable there. And I think it really resonated with a lot of women. You could see in the comments. And yeah, you did a lot of work with that too. So thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm so grateful for you and your time and all the work that you do. And I hope to have you on again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zora. Always a pleasure.
And thank you for everyone who's got to the end of the episode. I can't forget to say thank you. You're absolutely amazing to be here with us. It's just the three of us. So we appreciate you spending your time with us, and have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're at.